This conference will now be recorded.
Opposed? Is your mic on?
Yeah. And if we have one case in front of us tonight to look at, and it's oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We need to adopt the minutes. I need a motion, if you've read the minutes, I need a motion to approve. Or tell us if there's a change.
I've got a question.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. We made some changes to the subdivision ordinance, and they're marked in pen and ink. We scratched the line, all applications must be reviewed by the Planning Commission before consideration for approval by the Board of Supervisors or its designee. All applications shall be reviewed for consideration of approval and denial by the Board of Supervisors. And in looking at the minutes, the rest of that provision requires that the boundary line adjustment be approved, and then it has to be submitted to the clerk of the court within a period of time. But by scratching that sentence, there's no indication of how they're to be approved. And now, that's not a correction in the minutes, that's just a question as to something we considered and passed on. I think we need to reopen that before it goes to public hearing.
So may I answer that, or
Yeah,
at least
please.
try to? During the meeting, we did, or you all decided to add the, all applications shall be reviewed for consideration of approval or denial by the Board of Supervisors or its designee. When I sent the draft back to Chairman Carpenter, he wanted the consistency of what Hannon had suggested in the vacation of boundary line. So he recommended that I change it to say, to strike that sentence that you all had decided on and add, prior to recording, the deed shall be approved in writing on its face by the Board of Supervisors or its designee.
Okay, that's good. I think that'll cover it.
Now, for the minute purposes, if you want that change to reflect the conversation during the meeting, we're happy to change that back. You tell me.
No, I'm fine with it the way it is. Tracy?
I move to adopt the minutes as submitted.
Second?
Been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our case on the agenda tonight is, you would like me to read this, Tracy, or would you like to read it?
Your preferences.
Okay, if you want to read it and then tell us about it, and we'll move forward from there.
Sure. So Kevin and Sarah Smith have filed an application for a special use permit to operate a home occupation located at 280 Woodbrook Lane in Pratt's, identified by tax map number 48-1-17. The property is in the Woodbrook subdivision and is zoned as agricultural and contains 3.62 acres. The property is improved with a single-family dwelling, along with an attached garage, along with other numerous accessory buildings. The single-family dwelling located on the property serves as their primary residence. The applicants are proposing to operate a home occupation for a porta-john business that will allow off-site employees on the premises. They currently have 3 full-time off-site employees. The applicants plan to use the garage and home office space as a meeting location for their employees to discuss deliveries, daily service routes, and restocking of the work trucks with supplies that are stored in the garage. The off-site employees would arrive on site in the morning, park their personal vehicles in the dedicated parking area as shown on the site plan included in the application packet, and leave the property to complete their daily schedules. Once their daily schedules are completed, the work trucks would be returned on site and the employees would leave the property in their personal vehicles. Individual porta-johns will not be stored on site. However, restroom trailers will be stored on site in the designated parking area Again, you'll see in the site plan, there are 2 proposed parking areas. No customers will be permitted on site, and as noted, the site plan application was included in the packet. So if do you have any questions? Otherwise, I'd like to get right into my staff comments at this point.
I think we'd like to hear the comments first to see where we are.
Okay.
And then go from there, please.
Okay. So what requires a special use permit for the applicants is based on how our home occupation definition is written. I'm not going to read all of it. It's in front of you in the memo that I included at your table tonight. I'm just going to read the highlighted, the underlined section. It does say, however, a home occupation with less than 3 employees who are, and I apologize, this is a word that I cannot say, so I'm just going to skip it so you don't laugh at me. Employed on the site may be permitted by special use permit in the conservation and A1 zoning district. So because they are having their employees come on site, that is what required the need for the special use permit. Now, in talking with them about their application and looking frankly at other, businesses in the county, something that I would just like to throw out to you all to, frankly, to have a discussion hopefully, and please type in if you would like.
Yes, and some of you I've talked with, talked to Hannon about this as well as Tracy. I want to spend time and bring that up where it's underlined, please, in your
Sure,
packet.
yep.
The part that you're referencing. In the definition 20-98 for home occupation, she has it underlined there. However, a home occupation with less than 3 employees who are regularly employed on the site may be permitted by special use permit. So I've had some time to think about that. I know we've got it through development committee meeting. I know we've got it in the packet, so it's made it this far. But I started having pause about that, and I said, well, it would really be good to highlight that for the planning commission to see how they may interpret that, as well as ultimately, depending on how this moves forward, if it goes to the Board of Supervisors. How is employees regularly employed on the site viewed? Is that coming to get fleet vehicles, whether it's picking up utility trailers or landscaping crews, arborists, or any of that? If they're picking up vehicles and they're leaving a site to go do work and coming back and dropping fleet vehicles off, versus say a cabinet shop or a fabrication shop where work would actually, they would be on site for a work day. That may sound like it's splitting hairs, but I do think it's important to see how the planning commission interprets it. Supervisor Yao did inform me, and I'm looking at my text, so I'm not checking sport games. I'm just letting you know that, although Madison softball is playing championship tonight. Mr. Yao reached out and talked to Ms. Grayson, who was our former zoning administrator for many years, and agreed that the interpretation of less than 3 employees applies to on-site. So that's that example of fabrication or cabinet work and stuff like that. And she stated the planning commission years back discussed it and made that determination. Now, I know there's this saying about one board can't encumber another, but as the administrator of the county, as the zoning administrator, we want to make sure that we vet these and we have your full understanding of what that may mean to the body who has to consider these things. So I appreciate Tracy highlighting that, but that's something I would like for y'all to consider as you're discussing this case tonight.
Has anybody got any questions or comments for Tracy?
I do, Mr. Chairman. And there's several of them. I think we have 2 definitions that are not in conflict, but we need to determine exactly what they mean. One is employee, and one is regularly employed. My background is federal tax, and we have to deal with these issues a lot. And I noticed that in the application itself, we've got both the applicants, Kevin and Sarah Smith, as well as their corporation, K&S Porta-Johns. I don't think that we can grant the special use permit to the corporation because it's not the owner. It's my understanding that the special use permit goes with the land and the property owners. But regarding the corporation, I don't want to answer these questions because it would be revealing privileged taxpayer information, but the nature of the corporation has a tremendous amount to do with who or what is an employee. If K&S Porta-John Inc., if it's a garden variety corporation that's described under subchapter C of the Internal Revenue Code, then it's a garden variety corporation just like General Motors or Ford or any other large corporation. It could be a subchapter S corporation in which the notion of employment of the principals differs depending upon contract. It could be a limited liability company. And for LLCs, elections may be made, so it can be either a disregarded entity, and that will affect employee status. A tax partnership will make them partners and not employees, the two principal owners, assuming both of them own the corporation equally, or it could be a garden variety C Corp as an LLC. So if a corporation is operating now, and both the applicants are employees of the corporation, then we're at the two employee limit already. And I'm all for them being able to do this. I just want to make certain that we clarify and hopefully fix this less than clear ordinance.
Mr. Elliott, do you mind if I chime in?
Yes, sir, please.
So I do think a threshold question here is whether or not this particular business requires an SUP or if it's by right. And that is going to be, as it always is, case by case, super fact dependent. So we've got, and there's also, I think, the question of what does regularly employed mean, which is, I'll just put that to the side for a second. But per the definition, for home occupancy with employees, then the business has to meet, per this 298 of the zoning ordinance, the following criteria. A resident of the place is engaged in the business, so that seems clear in this case. The premises essentially doesn't look like a business, that it appears, other than a permitted sign, to be a residence or accessory building and not a business. I think we're probably fine there. No more than 2 employees can be working, I'll say frequently or regularly employed. And I understand Mr. Smith's point about tax code. There's also parts of what's required in terms of workman's comp if you've got 3 or more employees. And then there's all sorts of different ways to, I think, define this. And does it mean regularly employed for somebody to, like, somebody shows up Monday through Friday, I've got employees that come to my house. But they show up, we meet for 15 minutes or half an hour, they get their stuff and they go. Is that regularly employed, or does regularly employed what the intended meaning was that somebody does stay on site for the day and work? I'll be honest, I don't know what the answer is on that. I think it's the former, but I'm not sure. I think it's the latter, rather. And then there's also a piece in here about using mechanical equipment that exceeds 5 horsepower. And I think that was probably put in for cabinet shops, but I don't know that for a fact. I wasn't around when this got put in. And this is where it gets fact-specific, right? Like, this is a septic company, is my understanding. So are they pumping from truck to truck on site? Well, that's probably more than a 5 horsepower motor. If it's not, if they're not using them on site, then there's also a by right home occupancy. And maybe it falls under that definition. So I'll be honest, like I said, this is very fact-specific, and I'm not even sure if it requires a special use permit. Having said that, I think there's still all sorts of questions about what this definition means that aren't particularly clear from the statute itself, and maybe that's why this is a good discussion to try to hash out what it all means. I may have only cluttered this conversation, but I just wanted to try and frame it a bit.
Anyone else got any questions or comments?
I do for Tracy. So has this, apparently this has been going on, I guess. This did, because they already have trailers in the parking lot, and this has been ongoing. Has a neighbor complained about it, or how did this come to your attention for the county?
I think it would be fair for me to answer that, because
Okay.
these complaints started before Ms. Clatterbuck's tenure. Yes, I'd say anonymous, but at this point, probably the neighbors themselves have probably stated. And that triggered, calls to our office, requests to come by and view the site. VDH was called, and it's primarily about tanks in the ground. I'm not sure if that neighbor or someone called DEQ. So that kind of where everything began. And then as those discussions unfold, you kind of have discovery, if you will. Been out to the site myself several times. I think there are some things that the owners have done proactively, putting up a fence, for example, to, try to create some barrier. I think it is key to point out, I don't know if it's in the packet, if you were to go to the courthouse and pull up when the subdivision originated, initially, though, that HOA, if you will, and it was mainly for the purpose of the road, it did say no business in a residential. However, in 1995, the majority of the homeowners amended that, and that's what Tracy has before you now, and it just simply states, number 4, she has highlighted, that the said property owners' use of their tracts or parcel of land shall be governed by the Madison County zoning ordinance affecting the use of the land. So they took out what they initially had and they put this into place. So it really does fall under the purview of the county per the HOA, which this was passed. The landowner's signatures are on the following page, and this is from the courthouse records. So it did start as a complaint driven. And, it's led us here today, and even as you can tell, I've had some policy, I've thought about a lot of businesses, small businesses that exist in the county that have, employees stop in, grab what they need to grab, most time it's a vehicle or something, and then they leave. So what does that mean for the application we have before you tonight? But it did start as a complaint.
Do you know, because we keep running into this, I know that we like to keep this in an order of a short, timely manner of notifying other neighbors. And that I think we seem to always wait to the last minute instead of at our first workshop, they already know about it and can come in and start giving us their voice their opinions. Has that been done yet, do you know? Have other neighbors, other than the 1 or 2 or however many, has that gone out to anybody yet?
No, notification to the property owners of the special use permit public hearing has not been done because we can't send that notification out until the public hearing is scheduled.
Right.
Yep. And that's state code regulation.
That's state code.
It is.
Because that seems to always get in the way. It just seems like we're always in the last minute saying, when the neighbors come in and they say, I didn't hear about this, I didn't know anything about it till.
Well, what we can assure you, because I know this has come up before, we have an affidavit that shows when they are mailed out, which will be when the public hearing is scheduled for any of these cases, who had those. I would respond back to that if there is a certain geographical area, or you can call it upstream, downstream, so many feet, or a half a mile, whatever, we can look at that. Right now, the code, I think it has it to adjacent and kind of adjacent and joining, so that's why it doesn't go, say, 10 houses down. It goes to those specific properties. We can target some others, but right now, that's what the notification requires. But that,
Because it's an HOA, does that change that at all? It doesn't.
right.
I'm seeing no back here.
I have a,
Agreement's no different to us at all.
No.
No, it's straight property rights, and
Okay.
the HOA is their own deal.
I guess I got a question for Hannon. Let's say that I'm very familiar with HOAs. And right now, the HOA says what it does is all fine, but it takes 2/3 of the majority in that subdivision to change the HOA. So if the HOA got changed back to the way it was originally, would that affect the special use permit?
It would not affect the special use permit. It may affect what he's allowed to do on his property based on those private contract rights. But it wouldn't, it would be sort of parallel, right? And so it would be a separate issue.
And the other thing that I was gonna speak to, that Jonathan was saying there, we gotta be careful, in my opinion, what we do here, because all of you folks know that all over this county, there's people that's coming to someone's house and getting in the truck and going off to work. So, we gotta be real careful here, in my opinion. We could open a can and we can't get the top back on. That's just an opinion.
If I may add to, you know, and probably Hannon, Tracy, for y'all, I've just been looking at a couple of the other jurisdictions in the state, notably Arlington, Virginia Beach, so larger ones. They, in their ordinances, they go through and actually define the actual occupations. I don't know, probably Hannon, for you, rolls on cart before the horse in terms of, you know, how a county defines what is permitted and what is not. But I think we all kind of agree that the can of worms could come out before we have a good grasp on what could be defined as labor. Is there a way to potentially delay this, or are these actually hearings that we conduct good enough to redefine this in this specific case? I'm thinking specifically for the Smiths here.
Yeah, sure. So without more precise definitions, right, within our own ordinance, then you figure, you go, okay, where do we look next? Then you see if there's any help in state code or in any judicial opinions out there in the state that have defined things. And then if you don't have any answer there, you're basically looking to the dictionary and what people usually mean when they use these phrases. So you are, for this applicant, you know, we're deciding it based on what our ordinances are now. If we do change them, then we change them. But that's probably not gonna happen while this application is
Is
in
alive,
process. The part about precedent is sort of, yeah, something we need to be interested in, because there's sort of two ways for us to kind of go awry. One would be is we treated people differently, you know, and it felt ad hoc, right? Like each time we're saying something different. So we want to be uniform in how we apply.
Mr. Chairman, I'll let you take the meeting back over if you're fine with that.
Thanks.
You see where we are?
Sorry I was late, yeah. Yeah, right in the middle.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this?
I'll say something, Pete, thanks for acting as chairman and interim. Getting a lot of stuff going on
What
here.
number are you moving? I'm sorry. What
She's
number
looking
in
at the
microphone?
9.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as far as like defining regular employment, like that happens all over the place. From Department of Labor, or like you said, Workman's Comp, IRS, I mean, pretty much any, you know, just a ton of government bodies within business. And what I most often see is, you know, a set amount of hours or days a month. And, I mean, I think anybody working a full-time job would fall into pretty much anybody's definition of regular employment.
I agree with you. I think sorry, Mr. Cowan, I think the question's gonna be,
What number are you now? 6.
I think the question's gonna be, is it that this business has regular employees, and that's the end of the inquiry? Or is it, did the ordinance mean, did they have regular employees on site? Right, and maybe that's where you're going, sorry. But
That's all right, and those are definitely two different things, and obviously, if we're gonna use regular employment, we need to define what that is, and then we need to define, decide is regular employment or what kind of employment is permitted on site. But, I think in this case, and in most businesses, honestly, yes, Pete, it's a can of worms, and it's one that somebody's gonna have to open at some point. And because, one time, at one point, you got somebody starting a business out of their shed, which I think most home service businesses start out that way. That's the way I started. And then at some point, they're doing $3, $4, $5, $10 million from their shed or field or whatever, and that happens too. So we got to draw a line somewhere and look into this at some point. In this specific case, employment can go from, well, they're typically not here, to, well, it's raining today, or we don't have a whole lot of work. Hey, you wash the trucks, you do this, we need to, let's get, and so that's just a slippery slope to me as far as drawing that line, because, you're either, the business is running from a location or it's not. That's, to me, the most clear-cut way to do it, and not policing what people are actually doing there and fielding complaints. Should home-based service businesses be permitted? Yes, because there's probably 50 or 100 of these in the county right now that have been operating for, brand new, that started a week ago, to have been doing that way for 50 years. So it's going to take, it's going to take some work. I don't know.
Clay may remember this, or Jonathan, but the way this ordinance came about and got started, there was a machine shop that had 3 employees at Brightwood, and they had a 5-horsepower motor that run inside. No, I'm serious.
I remember.
It had a 5-horsepower motor that run inside, and that's where all this terminology came from.
And he moved to Orange and is employing a half dozen people now and making a mountain of money.
But that's where it came from.
That's exactly right. I've still got an issue with the employer. The employer is not the Smiths, it's the corporation. And the corporation's not a party to the SUP.
While Jim's talking about that, this may have already been brought up, I'm not sure. The first condition here makes the permit transferable and running with the land, and that doesn't seem to make sense to me for a home occupation. Has that already been mentioned, or?
SUPs normally run with the land. It could be a condition that this one runs with the applicant,
Yeah.
business.
Personally, for a home occupation special use permit, it would make sense to me that it should go to the occupant of the home, since that's what it's defined as. The other thing that I was somewhat concerned about, and again, this may have already been mentioned, the trailers. I realize that you have a maximum number on here. Where was that? 6. And I also know that you've shown us pictures of the ones that you have right now, which are small. These things are not always small. So I would recommend that in addition to a maximum number, we might put, we don't want a 30 or 40 foot, which is what some of these things are, trailer, 5 or 6 of them stored on the property, I don't think. That's, maybe need to have something along those lines in there too.
Isn't the question, though, at this point, whether or not the K&S Board, John, Kevin, and Sarah even need the special use permit? Based on it being a home occupation with 3 or less employees that are on site?
I think the way that ordinance is worded, as soon as they start having employees on site, that shifts it to the special use permit.
If they're regularly employed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's less than 3.
Regularly employed
Yeah,
on
less than
site.
3, yes.
But that's the question, is regularly employed on site. And like Nathan just said about all the service businesses in Madison, and there are many, where people meet and then they go out and do work all over the region. I do think that it's a determination on whether or not they need that special use permit, and then going down the path on, if you deem it needing the special use permit, then going into the conditions and going through the whole process.
Okay, a sort of comparable thing would be, let's say, a house cleaning service. Started in the home, that maybe 2 sisters or something start the business, and then they start bringing in employees, because they're doing very well, there's lots of demand for it. If they don't have equipment, machinery, anything involved, does that bring them to the requirement that they have to have less than 3 employees? Because they obviously would not be on site, they're obviously working off-site.
Right, if they don't have regular employees on site, if they don't have customer traffic, and they don't have a 5 horsepower equipment, then the house cleaning service you're describing would be a by right use that would not require an SUP.
Steve, what if in that scenario, they had 4 vans?
Yes.
They have 3 people coming to get those cleaning vans or a fleet and leaving?
Yeah, as soon as you start moving to having equipment involved, trucks, vans, whatever, Plus, in this case, all the supplies are stored there too, is what I understood.
Well, and it says 5 horsepower equipment other than that consistent with normal domestic use.
Well, I mean, their supplies, basically. Yeah, and if we are limiting ourselves to that, then literally any number of trucks can be there.
So if someone shows up and picks up a truck and he's there for 15 minutes, loads his supply, and he leaves, technically, he's still your employee. You're paying him. I mean,
But in the argument on that is whether or not he's on site doing work.
Right, so I think, does regular mean he shows up Monday through Friday at 8:30 and he's gone by 8:45? Is that what regular means? Or does regular mean that he's there for the whole day?
Well, and I'll give one more example, just locally to me. There's a family where the sons live off-site and a couple other employees. They drive to their parents' house in Park. They don't reside there, but now are we gonna get into,
There are
Tons of those.
hundreds
Yeah.
of those in
Yeah.
every one of your neighborhoods, every one. And that's,
there's some in Play-Dohs, like I know, there's 20 people that show up at a guy's house and go off to work.
Yeah.
Or 30.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, literally, the way this is worded, and Nathan has it right here, it's a special use permit unless there are no employees other than the home occupants. As soon as you move to the employees, then it becomes a special use permit.
Depending
And
on
then
how
it be-
you define
Yeah.
the employees regularly on site.
Yeah. So that's,
I'm still lost in trying to figure out what their by right use would be. I've been fumbling through all the paperwork, and I'm back to the regular thing here. What would be the by right use?
So if you didn't have, so I think question here for this body to think about and decide is if you have, or an easy example would be you don't have any employees, right? It's just you,
Right.
just you. And then you didn't have any customer traffic,
and you didn't use any big equipment, the 5 horsepower requirement. If you met all those criteria, that would be a by right use. Or, now let's go back to the employees. I think the question is, this thing we're talking about, if people show up in the morning, and then they're going to go off, they're scattered to do work. When this thing says, where is it? An occupation with less than 3 employees who are regularly employed on the site. And then it goes back down, so your question, I think the question for us to figure out is, does regularly employed on the site mean person's basically there 8 hours? Or does regularly employed on the site means they show up on a consistent basis during a work week?
What I'm actually asking is,
Sure.
we have a list of uses by right. So what is their use? I mean, it's not a hunting or fishing club, it's not a sawmill,
It's a
it's not
home
a farm
occupation.
winery,
Home occupation.
Home occupation.
just home occupation.
That's it.
And that can be anything.
Correct. And there, like was said before, is that
Okay, that's where I'm missing it then.
there are counties that list out these particular occupations, are going to be permitted
Okay.
with special use or by right, and we don't do it. Not that that's in and of itself wrong, it's just, we're left with questions.
So basically, the essential question is the fact that there's no question that there are employees. The question is, since they do not spend even a tenth of their time on site, does that invalid, Mr. Jackson may be right. That would mean if we don't consider them employees on site, if we read that whole sentence, then this doesn't require a special use application.
Correct. And it meets the other parts about not having machinery.
Yeah.
5 horsepower, right.
Hannon, I guess to you, or maybe Tracy, I'm thinking 2 things here, being a business owner with insurance, how the property is insured. Is it insured as business? Because then challenges and legal stuff, I'm thinking in the dark rabbit hole here. And then, secondly, is it defined in any other jurisdiction like a commuter lot? That's technically what's serving here, is it's a parking lot or a commuter lot. I don't know if the IRS agent would come in and say tax work was performed here, I'm trying to get into that definition of commuter lot, parking lot, actually invoiced here to define it a little clearer for us. I don't know if it exists anywhere else.
I've seen them defined as contractor offices or contractor yards, but not, I wouldn't really call that this either. I guess you could.
I don't have a great answer for you.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We have builders in this county, contractors, who operate their home office, and, their crew may meet them in the morning, but they don't.
Every tree service, the private vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
They load up in the big van and drive 90 down the road.
So at some point, we have to decide if,
Well, let me ask you this question, Hannon. If we deem that by our definition, we don't need a special use permit for these items, are we setting a precedent or opening up something where a lot of other people can say, well, I don't think because of my home occupation, I need a special use permit either?
Sure, but they're running a risk.
And running a risk is 100%. The second component of this is only truly applicable to service-based businesses. If they had a bakery where they were employing 10 bakers, certainly this would not apply to that.
Right.
I'm sure I can think of more examples, but then go the other direction on this. And Steve's coming up with house builders and carpenters and people of that nature. The list goes on and on and on,
And, I mean, like, let's say I had a place in Madison and my law office was out at my house. If I'm having customer traffic there, then I can't do it, even though I'm a solo. And then, I mean, to your point too, is it, if that's the way we go, right? With that definition of saying guys that show up and then leave don't count, well, there's nothing stopping us also from saying, hey, we need to clean this ordinance up. I mean,
We can do one and both together, and it's not exclusive.
correct. Now, yeah, correct.
Me personally speaking, I think we definitely clean the ordinance up, at least put some extra definition to it.
I would be very uncomfortable doing that in the middle of an application, though. That's not,
Agreed.
Well, and I would, right, I mean, you could, I think you could try to race to get something passed, but it would probably be a race to something that's not so good of a product.
the only other one, I just said it applies to just service businesses. And it does, but it only applies to a small scale, or smaller scale service business. Because once you have like CFOs and accountants there and secretarial work, and then you've got a home proprietor there as well, once they start hiring additional staff that, even though they are in that industry, they're disqualified as well. So it is a scale thing.
I don't entirely agree with that, because that could always be at somewhere else.
Oh,
You know, you got all the guys, the 20 guys meet, at the shop in the morning.
Oh.
You got, and
I agree,
good people or wherever.
No, I agree with that.
So what I'm hearing, Tracy, I have it here. Can you bring up the C1 zoning by right 3-1-14? So we are kind of stuck, right? It says home occupation as defined. So C1, A1 kind of go together. So what's by right? It says A1C, C1. So home occupation is by right, but again, that's why we're saying we're caught up in that definition, because in C1 it says home occupation is defined. You go to the definition in 20-98, it's not as defined as maybe what I'm hearing that any of us in this room like. So that's why we landed where we landed. But if you were going to do some work, honestly, not while you have a case ongoing, but if there's a desire to define that, then certainly I think so. I think I heard Mr. Whitman maybe mention a couple localities we can go look at that have defined home occupations. So really, again, it comes back to that gray area of what do you consider regularly employed on site. I think would determine whether you feel like we're going down an SUP, which would then have those conditions that are in the packet.
I just have one more comment, Mr. Chairman. And just so everybody knows too, I think I'm familiar with this business. We're neighbors at a commercial location here in town. You guys are rolling, you've been growing just like we have. I think y'all's business is about the right size from what I see, to where you would be operating from home, where you're not going to be putting out another $3,000 a month for a commercial facility or something like that. But in my opinion, it's not a whole lot bigger than that. And there's this line in the county, we've been talking about it, I have with several people for months. There's these people where, you ride by and see, and they're on A1, running a heck of a business, and it's a problem that's been coming our way, and I wish your neighbor just would have minded his own business, and we wouldn't all be talking about this.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, when I drove by there to look for it, if I wouldn't known the address, I wouldn't have known it was there. I had to look.
Well-
And look and see if that's where it was, but I did see the address, and that was the only way I would have known it was there.
And if I can, I think that's also sort of the whole intent of this is it doesn't look like a business, it's not signed that way, it doesn't have the customer traffic that way, and that way it's not having a real impact in terms of, I'll say, nature and character of the area it's in.
But how often do the large trucks come in and out?
Right, that's a good question.
I mean, that would be a question for the applicant, but if we want to get to that point, but, because I did see a sizable truck or two on the size of the house, and I don't know if they go in and out 3 or 4 times a day, once a day, twice a week, once a month.
And I guess the question I got, if we said, okay, we feel like this application probably doesn't need a special use permit, and some of the people in the subdivision say, oh, no, we think it does need a special use permit, can you defend that?
Yes.
I'm just curious.
Given the lack of specificity, shouldn't we side with the applicant in all measures? I mean, what authority do we have not to?
I wouldn't make a sweeping statement, but I would say in this case, yeah.
I would personally be very comfortable with that, but I mean, this needs some clarity.
Yeah, this is not a case where it's not something that's specifically provided for in the ordinance. I mean, anything that isn't is definitely not allowed. But since this is in the ordinance, yeah, I agree with Nathan, it should be, and Jim. So the question, we just have to decide then, I guess, if it requires this SUP or not. If it requires the SUP, that's because there are 3 employees, even though they're not on site. And if we decide that the employees don't count because they're not on site, then it doesn't require an SUP. So that's kind of, we're stuck.
Tracy, you mentioned the contractor. Did you say we do have some ordinances listed for contractor parking or whatever? And if not, what does that look like?
That's our B1.
It's all.
She might.
An industrial contractor equipment storage yard.
Nathan brought up a good point. Nothing in agriculture, probably the zoning would look at.
And Nathan, when you get to your CFO on site, convert to an LLC, check the box as partnership, and your partners are not employees, so.
So if there's no SUP, then there's no conditions we could put to this.
Correct.
Well, so then playing the devil's advocate, so they have 3 now. What about if 2 years from now, business is looking good and they go to 5? I know it says that they don't wish to, but what about if they did? Is that still going to be remaining the same thing? Because it is by right, could they get away with 5 or 6 or 7?
On site?
By what they're doing right now. If we're going to say that this is not going to be a special use permit, could they continue to grow?
Yes, if those employees are not regularly employed on site. Now, if they've got a bookkeeper and a manager and, HR and marketing working out of the house, then they're not going to be able to do it.
And the list of trailers could grow as well.
The list of trailers could grow as well, although I'll be honest, that's not something I've looked at on this particular one to see, is there some sort of storage yard, separate kind of SUP? So I don't want to shoot from the hip on that one.
I'm just going in another direction.
Sure.
Well, one of the things that I was concerned with that SUP was, I thought the idea of, if we had a SUP, that one of the things I'd like to see in that SUP, that no trucks can be parked on site with sui generis. I think that's That could be a very bad thing. Pops open, it all runs out. And that's really the only concern I got about the whole thing. I don't have any problem with what the people's doing, or what's going on. I just want to make sure that there is no sewage that has any chance to do any damage to any neighbors on site.
I don't know the answer to that either. and Maybe Mr. Smith does, but I mean, there's probably, I don't know if there's VDH regs on that or not.
Wouldn't the ordinance sort of cover that on the 5 horsepower deal? Because the vehicles themselves are covered under their, it just go, it's part of, regular inhabitants, I guess. You mentioned it earlier. The vehicles are different, but if they're pumping from truck to truck, then that would be over the 5 horsepower requirement, which would not be allowed in the, as a by right use.
Correct.
And I did, if you don't mind, I did speak to Emily with the health department today. The trucks are required to have an annual inspection with the health department. And so I asked her, you know, what type of safety measures do you all look at to make sure, like, to check for deficiencies and such? And she said there are certain things that they check for. And I said, okay, worst case scenario, let's say they're transferring from one truck to the other, because I don't understand it all. So that's how I said it. And I said, what if by chance, you know, it cuts, the hose cuts off or whatever, and some seeps out? And she said, I guess there's some sort of, the way they're designed, they're not designed to continue to do that. And so she said that if it does, it's gonna be very minimal, and if it were to do that, it would be so less that it would not impact wells. That's what she said.
So they have a inspection sticker, like a state inspection sticker kind of thing from VDH?
I don't know if they actually get a sticker, but I do know it's an annual inspection on all the trucks with Emily at the health department, yes.
And the trucks have they're a permitted number, so they've got to be logoed on the side. It'll have a VDH number.
And Peter, I guess, Mr. Chairman, being privy, we were there for the development committee meeting. There is another component of the health department with this ordinance that has been discussed. I don't know, maybe Tracy, you want to discuss that, or Jonathan, that may alleviate some of the concerns on the sewage on site?
Was this the tanks?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an earlier conversation with them, kind of a back and forth. Actually, Mr. Dixon came down from Fauquier County. He's kind of the hierarchy of VDH when it comes to this regulation. So what they asked for was something from the Smiths that stated that they, ceased operations, and the Smith family did provide that letter to VDH, and at that point, VDH said they were satisfied. Tracy does have, I asked Jamie specifically for code, because if it's something that, do we have jurisdiction to enforce? I like to see that. I like to feel comfortable. If it doesn't exist, then that's when I tend to say, well, we can't go out there and do that. So this is from the state building code that would address the storage tanks. So there would be some discussions from the building official of how that's done. I know the special use permit talks about removal in 30 days. I'd have to read through this and see if it's removal or allowed for you to fill in. That used to be a standard years ago. I'm not sure if that's still a way they allow you to abandon in place. But certainly, I know if it was me trying to hire any contractor, I think 30 days to ask someone to remove or to deal with that is a short time, because if you have a contractor to do it, I mean, it's probably going to take 90 days or so to get someone scheduled to do that. So there is a building code. I asked him to provide it to Tracy so we could have that tonight. And that's the section you see before you.
So rather than do removal, Jonathan, so we wouldn't have to dig them up, is it any way the building code can say, hell, You need to weld the tops of those shut, can nobody remove it or get in it?
I'm just jumping in because I talked to Mr. Wilkes about it today, which is, I think you can remove them, you can fill them with, it's some kind of cement mix to render them useless. There might have been one other material, there's a foam you could fill them with, but I think it's regulated about what you can't just use dirt, for example. There's certain materials that are required to be used. That's my understanding.
So it's either a removal or an abandonment in place option.
So these tanks, first of all, they were not permitted tanks, right? So that's why they're.
Not permitted through
Right, so that's why-
our office.
And
You may want to call on the applicant later on to see if they had any engineering or anything done, but as far as permitted through the county, no.
But then the other question was, obviously VDH does not approve them, otherwise they wouldn't have said they've got to be discontinued. So they're out of compliance in two cases, or in two ways.
VDH was satisfied with them saying,
Although I think VDH was satisfied with them saying that they weren't being used, is my understanding. So.
Any other question, discussion? Had we reached the point where we had talked to the applicant? Or?
No, we haven't.
Had not, okay. All right, any other discussion, questions? All right, would anyone have questions for the applicant specifically?
I do. I'm back to a question of how many times do your larger trucks go
Yeah.
up and down the road?
Let's go ahead and do this a little more formally. If the applicant would like to come on up. And
You did
address
ask,
it.
right?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Or just have the mic either way. And just identify yourself and we'll go from there.
Sarah Smith, nice to meet you guys. So the question is trucks.
So the trucks that the guys drive are smaller trucks, they go out and run, and that can be the larger trucks that you saw. Maybe we replace the weekend. Perfect. Thank you. Give me the answer again.
Yeah, I heard you, but I want, what is a smaller truck and what is a larger truck?
That's the 50 that we drive.
And a larger truck is what?
It's a septic truck that we haul to the transfer stations.
And that you move that how often?
Maybe twice a week. In the winter.
So when the smaller trucks come in, they pump into the larger truck on a daily basis?
I won't say daily basis, 3 days a week.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so essentially then you're using the larger truck as your storage tank as you come in each day.
And the health department said I can do that without using the tank.
Okay. You just have the single larger truck. Do you use that for other, I mean, do you go out to pump septic tanks too, or, no, it's just for that one use? Any other,
Would that have been the truck that I would have seen to the left of your house? Okay. I mean, you can barely see any of it. I mean, a barrier, you've got a nice barrier there. You've got, I guess that wooden fence on the left-hand side is new, looks new. Is that something y'all put up?
To give us privacy between us.
Mhm.
In the summertime, you can't see a lot, in the wintertime, you can see a little bit more.
not working?
Kim, I guess I'll just ask the question, have y'all ever had a spill or have you, equipment malfunction where raw sewage has leaked on the property? Or on the road, on the highway, anywhere where you hit a deer or something and it knocked something loose?
I think we understand, but would you just kind of take us through a kind of a standard operating day? Give us an idea of,
So the guys show up about 7 o'clock in the morning, and they get their trucks ready, blue paper towels, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and then they're gone. 20, 30 minutes maybe at the house in the morning. Monday mornings, we do a weekly sheet where everybody knows what they're doing and their schedule. So that it might be a little bit longer on Monday morning. And when they get home in the evenings, we all get back different times. Sometimes I don't even see them. You're out one and come back and go home. And that can vary anywhere between 4 and 6 o'clock.
Yeah, so everybody's assigned a certain route for that day.
And then I mean, again, you're repeating this to me from the development committee, but once y'all do have the full smaller trucks, can you walk through that process where you put in the big one and take it to the Albemarle or wherever you go?
Yeah. So you want to walk through?
Yeah, if you don't, I mean, I think it'd be helpful for
Yeah.
everybody.
So, yeah, when the smaller trucks are full, we can put them through the big truck and pump it right onto that or blow it into that, whichever you choose, and take the truck or dump it.
And y'all take it to Charlottesville because there's no other, that's the nearest dumping
We
point.
can take it to Orange some too, that's all we have on the
Orange or Charlottesville. is some of the
truck.
options.
It's only two.
And that's pumped out there and it comes back empty. So,
And I'm sorry, I might have missed it, doing all the mic stuff, but where do you guys do the pumping from the smaller trucks to the larger trucks? On site? Well, then that
So all the smaller
might be an
trucks
issue.
at some point left full of sewage that are not pumped out daily?
No,
Very rare.
very rare. They always go into the big truck and start the next one up empty. We don't pump every day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is pretty much delivery days for weekend events and stuff. Monday, Tuesday is definitely pumping days, sometimes Wednesdays we don't get any.
Do y'all have a HOA road maintenance agreement?
Yeah, it's so much money a year for gravel fee.
I'm thinking about your trucks going on. I know you're not all the way in the back. You seem like you're about halfway or a little less than halfway.
No, they haven't said anything to us about that, and up until maybe a year or so ago, it was, dump trucks in the back, and the guy recently passed away, but it was the same way to do.
your primary trucks are F-350s or three-quarter ton trucks, right? Or 1 ton, sorry, 1 ton trucks. But they're basically large pickup trucks. Yeah. Are they, and those are what you use to transport the porta potties and also the tanks where you pump them out. So you pump out from the porta potties on site onto the transport trucks, then you come back to your home base and transfer from that tank into the bigger truck tank.
Would this be considered a pump and haul?
You asking me? What's a pump and
He's bringing it back there and he's pumping it in there and then he's hauling it away.
Well,
He's using that truck for storage. Again, I'm not against this, but he's using that truck for storage.
So Emily told us that that's what we were doing with the tanks, we had a temporary 1-year
Mhm.
permit for pumping. And after that, she told me as long as it had a vacuum vessel or whatnot, then we could do that. We can't go.
That they inspect
Yeah,
yearly.
something they inspect yearly,
So the larger truck is vacuuming out of the smaller trucks. And I'm sorry for the dumb questions. You can correct my language on this if I'm saying stuff wrong. The actual device that's doing the hose and the motor to it, do you know what the specs are on that motor?
I know, but there's no way it's got horsepower.
Okay.
They're small.
Do you have like a brand and a model or anything?
It's a Massport, I don't know what they call it, XBL3, maybe?
Okay.
We're about this big.
it's not PTO operated from the main truck then, it's a separate motor?
The one big truck is PTO.
Oh, so it's PTO from the truck, okay.
What's
So-
PTO mean?
Power taker.
Oh, sorry.
God damn. I'm from Virginia Beach, all right?
Is that on the tank truck or is that on the trucks? that- Uh-huh.
There was a girl that, there was a girl. Same pumps, just kind of hooked up to.
Okay,
You can shoot one in and suck one out, that's it. We didn't use different terminology.
Yeah.
You can blow in
Blow
or
it,
something.
so basically your smaller trucks, you've got a pump on board to pump out the porta johns. And then the large truck, the big tank truck, you've got a pump on that can pump out the tank on the smaller trucks. Or the smaller trucks can pump.
We don't never have to fire the big truck up to pump on that. We can
Okay, so you don't normally use that as the pump.
load certain small trucks in the big truck.
Is that what you guys usually do?
Some of those.
I guess, Clay, maybe I ask you a question, you may remember this, you may not remember this. But when Mr. Shackelford was here, we went down this road, what kind of, and I'll ask you, what kind of liability does the county have if we approve this and we got a pump and haul? Because that was a big issue with Mr. Shackelford. And Clay maybe can speak to that, you remember.
Speaking strictly from a farmer standpoint,
You remember.
oh yeah, for sure. I would think that this would be a little bit, it is very, very similar, and I do remember. And adamantly, at that time and now at the current time, this has been talked about. Pump and haul is not something, it has to be bonded through the county. And the county takes on liability for that responsibility. What it would sound like Kevin has made, arrangements and talks with, Ms. Gordone from the Virginia Health Department, that his workaround on this is the mobile, full septic truck, that is inspected by VDH on an annual basis. So I'm hoping that gets us out of the pump and haul conversation. That was pretty poor.
That was actually pretty good there.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
All right, I don't know what a pump and haul is either. Anybody want to say?
So pump and haul, and it's generally done from a vessel, like whether it's a campground, it's a big poop tank, if you will. So it's a common area, whether it's a campground or whatever, it's being collected. If you don't have a conventional or proper alternative septic system, something that an OE says, yep, you can discharge, either it's treated and goes into a stream, or it's conventional and goes in the ground, yada, yada. So if not, and the county would have to have an ordinance to even do that, then there would be a pump and haul operation. Vessel to vessel, I've never had that question come up before, but traditionally when you hear pump and haul, there are houses that maybe a drain field has failed. And the health department will tell them, hey, you need to do pump and haul until you get this fixed, and they give them so much time to do that. So you're pumping from a tank like you would at your house, or like I said, a large area like some of these campgrounds, similar thing. It's a common area where waste is going to. I'm not sure what governs, and it would be a VDH thing anyway, as far as truck to truck.
It sounds like you've already discussed this with the Department of Health, and they have agreed that this procedure is okay. Since all the trucks are inspected every year. So VDH is not labeling this a pump and haul.
They
Because
did at first.
that with the in-ground tanks, that's what they were
They did
calling.
it first with the truck, is what he said.
Oh, they did it at first.
No, it was, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott.
What's the question?
At first, they allowed you a pump and haul with the truck, and then later on, you went back and she told you it was okay to do it with the truck, without the
She
pump and haul.
does the pump and haul for the tanking. And that was the 1 year that they were doing that. And
And that was in response to the septic not being permitted correctly? Is that why we got to the 1-year mark with them? Because the tanks are now invalid, I guess, in other words, that's why the truck situation, or not situation, the truck operation is.
Yeah, when they said we could do that, that's when Wayne Dixon came down, and I was sitting in that meeting, and that's what they come up with, that we could do, be legal to do it.
Were the tanks permitted to begin with?
They wasn't permitted in the very beginning, we had a professional engineer out of Rutherford come down, paid him a lot of money to say that they were legit tanks, but they were right, alarm systems on it for this permit. So he signed off and permitted that.
But they didn't have a permit from the building officials in the county. And your engineer didn't tell you that you needed one? He's, yeah,
You didn't have one?
I didn't know we needed.
yeah.
You just dug a hole and put a tank in the ground? And that's what you were gonna run, how you were gonna run your business?
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
One, I
Yeah.
think, for everybody is just whether or not we consider, where are we on whether or not this is a 5 horsepower machinery?
The,
What was the model of it, Kevin?
I think it's called XDL2, XDL2.
What was the name brand?
Passport.
Passport. Say it.
Well, but I thought he was saying that, I'm not worried about the dually ones, but one of the big truck.
XL what?
XLV.
Not good. Okay, 2?
Yeah, so then that would be, right.
right. And that, yeah, if it's relatively new, it probably won't list horsepower anyway. They don't do that anymore. And the,
Didn't show the voltage of it.
yeah, the PTO-driven pump on the big truck, that's, I don't think that would be considered to be an on-site motor. And actually, I'm not sure the ones on the smaller trucks would be either. Would you think so? It's on the truck, it's not on the home site.
Well, I'm gonna wrap myself around the axle, because
Okay.
I think, I'm also thinking of a septic truck as not being something that's normally consistent with domestic use,
Mhm.
or even A1 use, but
Can I?
y'all could tell me I'm messed up.
5 horsepower, was it noise or was it safety? Why was that the?
I think,
It was what somebody had. then.
It was neighbors.
Are
Yeah.
these muffled? Are they,
They have mufflers on, yeah, they make noise.
they're not encased like with a silence, like with those silent generators or anything?
In the machine shop, you could not hear it. No. They were neighbors. I'd go down there and stand beside it and could not hear it when it was running.
Yeah, and they had brought 3-phase power into the garage and all, I mean, it was full-fledged industrial.
Right beside the Brightwood store.
By the Honda.
No, it doesn't look like it. Yeah, you're on there. Go to their maintenance manual. It doesn't look like it's 5 horsepower. Doesn't look like it. It's all, it ranges from 1.8, all the way up to
I was asking more
just shy of.
big
just
trucks
shy
rather
of
than the
5.
little trucks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, no, that's a disaster.
I'm sure it wouldn't be on the little trucks, but on the big truck, it's probably gonna be more than that, because that's a big vacuum system to suck
It's
out.
only one number higher, so that goes to a 3, I believe. And I mean, if you run the truck motor itself, but the vacuum pump itself is what's actually running. The truck motor is just spinning the shaft and the pump.
But the 350 pumps have a way, the 350, the dually trucks have a way to push this material into the larger truck without turning on the larger truck at less than 5 horsepower. There you go.
Mr. Chairman, or Hannon or Clay, is this something, I guess if, we're down to the point of, is SUP, or then they just go home and it operates as it normally has, right?
Correct.
So-
Without the tanks.
Without a tank?
Yeah.
So no other proffers, because at that point, we couldn't offer
Right.
any concerns,
If it's by right, there's no,
Just by right, you can't even tell him he can't do the tanks. I mean,
You said the tanks, aren't you citing building codes?
Yeah, the tanks would be,
Tanks have to be,
By the building code.
building
okay?
code, they have to be filled. Filled in multiple different ways or full. But it's the operation of the business that, and the tanks frankly are not valid even with the special use permit, so that doesn't play at all. The question is just like you're asking, is it special use permit or is it by right use?
So, I've been reading this, I think my mic's gone, but anyway. When I read over in our zoning ordinance 20-98, I'm gonna block out the rest of the stuff at the bottom, and it says an occupation, home occupation is defined as an occupation limited to persons who reside on the premises where there's no evidence that will indicate from the exterior that the building is being utilized in whole or in part for any purpose other than a dwelling or accessory building thereto. And then you go down and it's provided however a homeowner, all that stuff. It's not a by right use. Like, none of this stuff is a by right use unless it's the persons who reside
Unless it's the homeowner.
at the
yes.
home.
The occupants.
Black and white. And then it goes on to say these things are reasons where you can do a special use permit if they don't have over 5 horsepower, if they have less than 3 employees, if they have a special use permit could be issued, but otherwise it's not a home occupation unless it's just the homeowners. And, you know, I'm not going, that doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh, you know, sorry your neighbor turned you in, y'all's tough luck. We're going to let the other, in looking in the comprehensive plan, what seems to be 175 businesses in the trades, like home-based service businesses as of 2011, you know, just keep operating because their neighbors didn't, you know, like, say something. Like, that's not the case, but the whole thing's just, needs some work. But that's, I mean, that's what it says to me,
Yeah.
20-98. To me, it's black and white.
It clearly says what you just read, you can't do it by right.
Yeah.
All right, can you shoot?
Any other questions for the?
Well, I'm not sure, because you've got a second half of that sentence. So let's say you have, well,
Yeah, if we hang our hat on the
Yeah.
on-site, that's where we really start opening it up. As long, if we just said fewer than 3 employees, period, there
But-
wouldn't be a problem, but,
But we open it up to being able to issue a special use permit.
yeah. But then, to be consistent, we would have to issue 50 million new special permits in the future, as long as they're not on site all day. I mean, we could have potentially 50 employees, as long as they come in the morning and then leave, and then come back in the evening.
Or what's our alternative? Issue the SUP as it is now and then change the ordinance after this case? Is that, and then what kind of legal?
Yeah, then I mean, we still have the situation of we're closing the barn door after the horses are out, so.
That's the health of the neighbor.
Yeah, and of course, the other aspect of this, as Pete said, is as long as there's no adverse impact on the neighbors. So, you know, we're splitting hairs on the ordinance, and we're not really looking at whether it has any impact on the neighbors. And right now, it doesn't look like it would, so. But we have to abide by the ordinances somehow. I think we're at an impasse right now. We need to think about it some more. That's what the workshops are for, is to try to think things through. Anybody else have a question for the applicant? Any other questions? Thank you again. Okay.
what, are we waiting until next meeting to determine whether or not they need an SUP or?
Yeah, right now, I think we're just at an impasse.
I don't, if it's going to public hearing, then we have to wait another month for that. I think, you know, I agree with Nathan, our ordinance needs some work or whatever, but we've got a case in front of us.
Yeah.
And the way I see the case in front of us, what do we have that definitively says this case can't be approved? Maybe not as a by right, but as a special use.
And the special use may even get a little tricky, so we continue on to read that. I understand what was stated. If you read it, it kind of stops there by right. But if you were to say, okay, let's go special use, however, a home occupation with less than 3 employees who are regularly employed on site may be permitted by special use permit. So if someone has 3 or 4 employees, are we saying before we give you an SUP, you have to get down less than 3 employees? So there's trip hazards on both sides of this thing.
If they're working on site.
On site,
I would
well,
say yes.
definitely says on site, and they're not working on site. Well,
No.
not for long anyway. They are
I would
working on
say-
site because they gotta spend a little bit of time doing something there.
Regularly is one time a year. If you do it every year, that's regular.
I mean, when they pump from one truck to the other, they are working there, but not for very long, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, but it doesn't say regularly, it just says less than 3 employees on site. So, I think that's right. Oh, regularly?
It says
Oh,
regular,
well.
it does say regular.
Regularly employed on site.
Regularly employed on site.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question is, if we're not gonna look at a direction we need to go here, when we come back, we're gonna be in the same
Right.
rut we're in. We gotta, in my opinion, we need to decide some direction to try to go here. So if we're gonna look at it, we can move forward. I mean, we don't decide anything, we'll be right back to where we were next time we meet.
Right. I agree.
You don't think that we should go through the case as if it was going to go through, so we can at least accomplish something? Other than just all of us looking dumbfounded.
Well, yeah, personally, I think that these are not employees regularly on site. And, you know, if we're gonna hang our hat on that, that gives us the chance to set up the special use permit.
Yeah, but the applicant isn't the employer.
Well, the company is. The company's not the applicant, though, is what you were saying.
The applicant has no or the company has no standing. to
But
apply.
that's something that Tracy can fix easy.
Mhm.
That's an easy fix.
Well, but does the applicant need to be the property owner? Not necessarily.
I would say for home occupation, that would be a requirement. Either the owner or someone who is renting, leasing, et cetera. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a home occupation.
It says an occupation limited to persons who reside on the premises.
Yes.
So,
But that doesn't necessarily have to be a home, they just reside there.
They have to be residing there, and I guess in some fashion that makes them either a renter, or leaser, or owner, I guess. Or child, could be. That still leaves, well, I guess we could say, we could kind of take a straw poll. How many think that the phrase on-site, regularly employed on-site, would, since people say that these employees are not in fact regularly employed on site, since they are only there for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening or something. Nobody?
No, I think they're regularly employed on site.
You think they are regularly
Yeah.
employed on site? Okay, so that's,
There's nothing that says they have to be there 8 hours a day.
okay. So how many would think that that means that they are regularly, in fact, regularly employed on site?
I'm with Jim on that, and I'm not comfortable saying, every contractor in the county, if they came in here, is going to say, my guys just come in the mornings and they go, like, we never do anything here. At which case would much be less true than in this case.
After discussion, I don't know if I agree with that statement, but I agree with how Nathan stated the opening of our ordinance. And I think we have to stick with what the ordinance is now, even if it's poorly worded and probably not a very up-to-date ordinance. So I'm in agreement with Jim and Nathan at this point.
Okay, 3, that they are regularly on site. Mike, what do you think?
Skip the P right now.
Skip you. James, how about you? We'll move back and forth. Give Mike some chance.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, they do go there every day, but it's not.
Yeah, so you're a maybe. Okay, so we got a maybe and 3 yeses. Okay. Pete, what do you think?
I think I have to agree with Nathan.
They are regularly on site. Okay. Okay, well, you can, it's not a tie, Mike, but you can put us over the edge.
Based on our ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we have to work with.
I guess I'm gonna agree.
Okay, so based on the straw poll, we think that they are regularly employed on site, and since there's 3 of them, that they are not eligible for the SUP.
More than 2.
More than 2, it's less than 3.
So what does that convey?
It doesn't meet the requirements for the SUP. They have to be fewer than 3 regularly employed on site.
So are we saying that it's allowed without SUP?
No. Since there are employees, that means it has to be, it's not by right, since there are other employees. I'm pretty sure that's the way it reads, right?
So the way I read that up there, by right, definitely people who live on the premises without question. I think we all reach consensus on that. The 3 or less, or go back.
No, it's
No, you're
not 3 or
fine.
less, it's less than 3.
Well, we're gonna bring it on the screen.
Yeah.
All right, so with less than 3 employees, that's allowed by regularly employed on site, may be permitted by special use permit.
Yeah.
So to get the special use permit, then if we're reading that as I'm filling interpretation here tonight, we're saying unless you have less than 3 employees, you can't be considered for an SUP. That sounds like a quagmire for a lot of businesses in this county.
Yeah, which is what the problem is. As it stands right now, just a straw poll very quickly, the majority thinks that these are regularly employed on site. And since there are 3, that means it's more than less than 3.
And I do take one exception. I don't know their status as employee. It could be independent contractors, in which case they're not employees.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do they get 1099s or W-2s or?
Or if they're in a partnership and get a K-1.
Yeah.
Here's what we want to think about hard, in my opinion. When this young lady writes her story in the paper, and John Doe's here, and his neighbor's over here, and he reads it and sees what's going on, I'm gonna turn my neighbor in, I don't want him doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
Tracy's gonna get 380 phone calls that says these people are doing exactly what it said in the newspaper, you can't.
No, not in the newspaper, in our code.
Not picking on you, dear, by no means.
Yeah. And of course, the fundamental problem is, this is a small business. It's clearly a home occupation. I mean. but
Which
we're-
we encourage in the
Yeah,
comp
we're
plan.
trying to encourage that,
Yeah.
yeah. And yet, the ordinance clearly, as far as we can see, doesn't allow it.
So do you have an opinion which way we could go and stay legal?
I'm going to first ask you a question, if you don't mind, as somebody that was around for when you said there was a welding shop that was,
Yeah.
or machine shop, what was it?
Yeah, it was down the road from us.
What was their employee status?
Their employee status, they had either 3 or 4 employees. But the problem was, it wasn't really the amount of employees, they claimed it was the noise. And that's why they cut it to 5 horsepower, was because of the noise. Correct me if I'm wrong, Clay, but I think that's the way it was.
And they also had some commercial traffic.
Yes,
In and
and
out.
big trucks coming in and out, and they had gotten some three-phase power put in, and
Was that operated out of a home?
Shop behind the house.
It was a
Accessory-
it was a separate building.
Accessory building, yeah, but
But it says accessory
Yeah.
building.
He's in Madison. His shop.
He was in Brightwood.
No, he
Not
was in
Ronnie,
Brightwood,
no.
but now it,
that was the other guy that moved to Orange. What's his name?
I forget his name, but.
He had a shop there, and he outgrew those 4 employees in the shop, and he moved to Orange and has a machine shop in Orange now.
Yeah.
Well, to your question, what's my opinion in terms of the employees? I think that regularly employed on the site means that they are, not that they're there for 15 minutes or half an hour and go. Regularly employed on the site, to me, just common sense reading of it means that they're there and they're working on the property for, essentially a full day.
Well, if that's what it is, then I changed my vote.
Well, that's what we were trying to decide. Is that
Yeah,
what it is?
yeah, I mean,
But does that mean we all want this
Yeah,
to work?
well,
But does that mean we can now issue a special use permit if it's,
If we
or does it
decide.
mean we go back to by right? 'Cause-
Well, I'm still, I had not read this the same way that Mr. Cowan did, and I think his reading is perfectly acceptable, which is sort of a new question for us, right? Which is limited to persons who reside on the premise. I had read this sort of as a whole. He's chopping it, which is also, I think, fine, maybe a better way to read it. I'm not sure.
He says you gotta be able to walk through that door first.
Correct. And so if that's the case, that we're saying because there's any employees that don't live there, it's still eligible for an SUP, but we would go through that process. But I think it's a can of worms, but it's a different can of worms and a smaller one, which is if you've got a tree business and you've got people that are coming and going, you probably need an SUP.
Haywood up in Orange.
What's that?
You're gonna have Haywood up in Orange.
Well, oh, I hear you. But it's,
So Hannah, how do we, this is, I mean, if we change the number from 3 to 5, we'd fix this, probably for a lot of people. How do we,
But you can't change that without going through a public hearing.
I know, but what's our fastest way to ensure we're not hurting this small business?
I mean, you've got an application in front of you.
Let me ask you this, if we change this from 3 to 5, we got a public hearing coming up on all these other ordinances that we're doing. Can this piece, if we agreed and the board agreed, could be put in there from 3 to 5? Mr. Jackson?
Well, you're gonna have to advertise it, right? We're gonna have to,
yeah, I can't go to.
we're gonna have to go through the whole thing. And then, I mean, I think the question is, do we wanna just take a better, longer look at this? And then, I don't know, I was just in 7-Eleven before I came here, and it was an issue with the gaming, skill games, right? And so it was just like, all right, skill games out, it was a letter from the Attorney General's office for Virginia, and it was like, skill games are out. We're gonna give people time to comply with this because this is a new change and all that. I mean, if we end up going, depending on what the decision is, we could also just say, hey, look, we're gonna clean up the ordinance in a way that makes sense for Madison in 2024. And we're not gonna go rushing to shut down a whole bunch of small businesses while we work through that. I just offer that up as also a possibility. If,
Well, we all ultimately know what we want to see the outcome for this.
is that right?
Well, hopefully. Well, I mean, they're already in business and they can keep running the business till we work this out. Is that correct?
I'm not shutting them down until at some point.
I think this is in a regular situation, on the basis that there are so many businesses in Madison County that everybody values, and they're our neighbors, we go to school with them, church, or wherever, you know? Apparently Hammond's in 7-Eleven.
I'm playing skill games.
It also makes me wonder what you're doing on the weekend. I think this isn't just a case-by-case deal. I think on this one may be one to say, let's slow down and let's revise in a pretty prompt way. The one that comes to me is the 5. What are the negative ramifications from that?
Yeah.
None of that's been vetted out.
Woodchuck's got a lot more involved.
I mean, just go down the list. I mean, it's everybody. I think we should, and I know the board will go down right along with the path. If y'all want to try to revise this and get something to public hearing pretty promptly, I would think that would be very, very appropriate.
Can we take the 5 horsepower out too?
What are you going to 12? I know, do some
I mean,
research,
is
figure out
it because of
something that
noise?
works for people.
I mean, I got tractors that make a whole lot more noise than that.
Oh,
yeah.
everybody.
You had a
I
lot of
mean,
them.
you get the old John Deere's, they're making a lot of
No,
noise,
but
you know, so.
Is it domestic or household?
If we put this case on pause, you don't have another workshop, you've got your next regular meeting. There wouldn't be, do we have public hearings at the next, or joint hearing? Yeah, so we gotta do it, but maybe we could do something where we do, use the second portion of it as a workshop, start getting going on this. Ask Tracy to start coming up with some stuff to try to make this better.
So I'd like to separate the two. I said this, or, no, I don't think I was around for the final event venue or rural resort or whatever the heck it was called, but you got an application separate to deal with. Discussion of your ordinance, I agree, I understand fully, but separate. So I just, for the record, make clear that I understand all those comments. You may want to deal with an application you have before you, before getting to a public hearing on an ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, Hannon, guys, jump in. Do we need to move to cancel the application, to decline the application, as long as it's whispered over
I
that
think that-
enforcement will not be enacted over the next?
The
Is it where we're going?
applicant could withdraw, though.
Just withdraw the application?
Well, we can't do it. That would be the applicant to decide.
What we don't want to do is to start making changes in the middle of the application process. That's never a good idea. So,
Well, that's what we're getting ready to do.
yeah,
Well,
If they withdraw, though, then it's not.
then, yeah, they're not. if
but,
the-
or you could also just proceed with the application.
Well, yeah, that's the other possibility.
We can't figure that out.
That's right, yeah.
How can you proceed with it if we can't figure it out?
Well, we can always say,
If we,
pass it to the board.
Right. I mean,
We can't.
it's advisory.
What we want to do, we can pass it to the board and let them decide.
if we agree what regularly on-site means, regularly employed on-site, if we agree that these employees are not regularly employed on-site, we can proceed.
Mr. Chairman,
If we agree that they are
I don't know
regularly
if we can
employed
agree on
on-site.
that.
Yeah, we said that they were regular.
Well, if we go by
But then-
Mr. Wright's definition, then that changes my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so we got,
And mine too.
okay.
I got a few things. I think the the 3 or fewer than 3 employees is something that is same for like workman's comp guidelines, which makes it seem pretty appropriate, because that is sort of a crossover in business when you really, and that's the other state, if not federally regulated for that.
That makes sense, yeah.
But as far as what it says and what changes need to happen, I think that needs to happen. I think regularly employed on the site, I think it says, at the site, whatever it says. I read it, we were all kind of in favor of that.
On this site.
On the site. I'm perfectly comfortable in this case taking the advice of the county attorney. And
Reasonable minds can differ on this.
and I've got no problem under the situation moving forward with that. It makes sense to me to do that. Any discussion of whether this does or does not need to be changed, we can have that
Afterward, yeah.
65 days from now. I say we just stop having that conversation. look at this case in front of us, and then after that, we can or not do whatever we want to do. And in this case, I would be inclined to take the direction of the county attorney and his interpretation of our zoning ordinance, which would be that they're not regularly employed on site.
So if that's the case, Steve, we'll take a straw poll to see if we agree that it doesn't need a special use permit.
Okay?
Well,
Are you saying,
you, sorry,
No, it still needs a
you still got the first part of the
Right.
definition and whether or not that
As soon as
does.
they've got employees, regardless, it gives them.
so you're saying go back to the traditional way of holding this workshop, so you will go through and ask them if they have anything to add, and that's where we need to be at this point. Is that right, Nathan?
That's right.
There you go, let's do that.
I'm also gonna look to see if there's any public comment.
Oh, that's right, we have to see if we got anybody online.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a
Yes.
public comment to the applicants as well. Since y'all started with the development committee, and I know you've spent several hours and some dollars on this, I don't know if apologies in order or just thank y'all for sitting this patiently and answering all the questions and go through this because of a neighbor. So, y'all are doing good things for them.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, I guess then, I guess we'll re-poll. And the poll question would then be, do we agree then, we'll blame it on Hannah. Do we agree that these 3 employees are not regularly employed on site? So that would allow them to have the special use permit.
Correct.
Okay, Mike says correct,
Yes.
correct? Pete? Nathan? Yes,
Give them the definition.
give them that definition. Yes. Okay, so it looks like we're willing to proceed. from
Proceed
that
as it
point.
was.
Yeah, proceed with the conditions and so forth, and then work on those.
Or not.
Or, well, that depends on the applicant.
All we do is recommend.
Yeah, we're,
Remember, folks, we only make a recommendation.
We're advisory only.
and we're willing to recommend that we can at least move forward looking at the SUP. That this is, the ordinance allows us to do that, based on Hannon's definition. That's what you get paid the big bucks for, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right, now, we've got one more workshop then to work on this. Tracy, do you want, have you been through the conditions yet with this when I wasn't here?
We have not.
You have not?
Yeah, if we can.
You want to bear with us for a little longer, and we'll go through the conditions and then go back to your comments? Okay, Tracy, if you would. That'll move us along for the next step.
All right, the first one, which I think someone already made a suggestion. My experience is that SUPs run with the land, but I heard that we want to possibly change that to
Yeah, we-
runs with the business, or how would you like that
With-
worded?
With the applicant.
With the
And that
applicant.
raises the other question about the business is not applying for this. And,
I would say so long as the applicant owns the property, then it's running with the applicant.
yeah,
And then if they sell it or try to title the business's name, then that might be a problem.
yeah. That's, and we do occasionally do the SUP that goes with the applicant, not with the property. So.
Okay,
And I think this would be an appropriate time to do that for a home occupation.
okay.
Is there any disagreement on that?
Nope.
Run with the applicant. Okay.
Any other issues with number 1 then, before I move on?
Is there a page number for this? Trying to sort through this again.
In your agenda,
It's
if you go, are you online, sir, on your packet?
No, he's thumbed
It's
through it.
5 from the back.
Okay.
I thought it was trying to.
I don't think so. It's been a second copy.
Okay. And this also says transferable. Do we want, if we say runs with the applicant, does that take out the transferable too?
It's non-transferable and shall run with it.
Yeah. Indefinite permit, okay. Have you found yours yet, Mike?
No, he's doing the chair.
Okay, okay. Okay, anything else on that first?
One other possibility is you could just allow some flexibility to say it's transferable with board approval. And that would mean they'd have to come back. Instead of new owner, new applicant and all that, but that's just a thought.
Would that, let's see, would that be financially beneficial to them? If a new owner, if they transfer to a new owner, do they have to go through the same permit process?
I have no idea in terms of the
No
permit
idea.
process. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to give them a little more flexibility, but still some control from the board on this.
Well, I mean, that can, I mean, we've got another workshop to go through, so we can deal with that. You want to look at the second one?
The special use permit is an indefinite permit, subject to Article 14-3-3 of the zoning ordinance. Special use permit shall be recorded in the land records of the Madison County Clerk's Office within 30 days after the date of approval. Pretty standard. Any questions before I move on? Number 3, the proposed use shall be/remain in compliance with all county ordinances, the Uniform Statewide Building Code, and all applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations. And that sort of captures the annual truck inspections, any VDH requirements, and all of that. Building code, it captures all of that, so.
Is VWH included in all that then?
Yes, sir. Number 4, proposed use shall be limited to the following hours of operation, Monday through Sunday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Anything before I move on? Okay, number 5, I think we've talked about this a lot. There shall be less than 3 employees who are regularly, that word, employed on the site. I'm not sure.
I
Do we
would
need that
put
in there?
as amended at the end of that,
As amended, okay.
yeah.
Well, that hasn't been amended though.
No,
Correct.
But we're saying that if it is amended, then the amendment
What about
applies.
if it does get amended? Can we just move that up to say 5 and that covers them?
No, we don't have the authority to say 5.
That's true.
It
If
says-
they
we're
could,
deciding this.
Now, this would be ultra virus, though.
if,
The code says less than 3.
if we change something in the future,
Yeah.
it's their option to come in and amend their, ask to amend their special
But
use.
if we say that they shall be limited to 3, less than 3,
Who are
we're in
regularly
accordance
employed,
with the code as amended, and the code is amended to 5, and they don't have to come in to have 5
Why do we have to state,
Yeah.
why do we have to state the,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, I don't think we can do that right now because we can't make that change, nor can we, nor can we refer to a change that we might make in the future. I don't think we can do that.
That's typical statutory construction.
Right,
Yeah, I think it's going to be essentially locked in time.
yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, other than any office staff or persons that reside there, owners, they don't have any employees on site anyway,
Yeah.
according to our
Actually,
county attorney, so this is really,
yeah, you should take
Just
that out.
omit number 5.
Not-
Actually, take it out because if they're gonna,
but it's funny that it's a sticking point again, and everybody's back onto, these employees coming on site, but
if
still.
they're complying with all county ordinances, you don't need number 5.
Okay,
Right.
sounds good.
Yep.
All right, number 6, the storing of an individual porta-johns on site is prohibited unless they are stored inside a fully enclosed building and/or structure However, the restroom trailers are permitted to be stored on-site and are not required to be kept in a fully enclosed building and/or structure. There should be no more than 6 restroom trailers stored on-site. There was a comment made earlier about limiting the size of the trailer. I do note, correct me if I'm wrong, they currently have 5 of the restroom trailers. So there's the potential for, the future purchase of at least one more.
Well, the reason I made that comment is, again, looking potentially to the future, I have seen these things literally that are the size of a tractor-trailer. They're like 40 feet long and 12 feet wide. And I don't think we want 6 of those stored there. So, would you have any objection perhaps to maybe some size limitation on the trailers as well? That we
I
can,
don't know about size limitations.
I mean, the
We
ones,
don't have that big of festivals around these areas to need trailers that big. The number of trailers limited, yeah, that bothers me a little bit because just the other day, Madison 4-H wants to have one at the fair for 4-H kids to change into. That's what we want the older trailers for. The newer trailers, I wouldn't put it in a situation like that for the same reason somebody would want to use it for a wedding. It's kind of used for 2 different things. Don't want it to get messed up. I won't say that we have intention of buying it. But some of the ones we have now might be used for 4-H kids and a new one coming for weddings upgraded. Or something like that. Not saying I would want to get rid of it if the other one started getting deemed up.
yeah, well, you see my point about the potential size difference there. That's, I don't, the trailers that you have, I don't see that that's any,
Our trailers that we have hold up to 400 people. And I can tell you in 10 years, I've sat on events that maxed over that.
So we would need bigger ones. I wonder though, I'm not comfortable with like the 6, we're kind of,
Y'all want to support small businesses
Yeah.
and help us grow. This is another thing.
yeah, I guess we should, since we're doing this
Okay.
again.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, 5 or 6 of these trailers is clearly not a problem. I mean, you've got a secluded site where you can park them.
That trailer that you're looking at right there is 10-foot long,
Mhm.
6-foot wide.
Yeah,
What's the largest one you have?
The white one, I don't know if you have a picture of that one or not. It's the one right beside the home truck here. I think it's probably 14, 15 foot long, and that's a forest one,
What's the largest one you can reasonably foresee buying?
a forest dog. I have no reason to think anything bigger. It costs so much more for that, it's not a need. I wouldn't spend the money for one bigger than that. That one's bad enough as it is, and people wouldn't want to pay the rented price for the bigger ones. It's just not that many people in Benton. We usually strictly for weddings. We don't set these at fairs or public uses. These are strictly for weddings, so it's all small situations.
I feel like I'm just not comfortable with just pulling 6 kind of out of the hat, and I don't know, it feels like it's too much control with no real purpose behind. I don't know, I hope I worded that okay. We don't want to just pull things to make conditions.
Us sitting here and listening to all these comments, it comes back to the regular employees on site. We clearly have no idea what is right or wrong. And I feel like it's getting made up as we go.
Yeah. The way to put it.
If that would be set in stone what we want instead of taking a vote what we think is said, because I don't think that's the right either.
How many trailers would you like to have in your fleet?
I'm happy with what I have right now.
But, I don't know, project it out over the next 10 years.
we have to put a limit?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't wanna put a limit.
yeah.
I mean, would you have-
yes, we do, but
would you have
I'm saying
12? Would you have
why
100?
leave it in there? That's what I'm saying.
Actually, what we're asking really is,
Yeah.
how many of these trailers and your trucks can be reasonably stored on site? And if you exceed a certain number, they should be stored somewhere else. Now, you're already storing your
Yeah,
porta-john
okay,
somewhere else.
That seems reasonable, because it's a
Yeah.
certain number of parking
Yeah,
spots.
right, we're not trying to limit what you can do.
Okay,
It's just
okay.
what this site can accommodate.
So maybe we should take a look at their site plan real quick, if you don't mind. So the parking area to the left, which is option 2, am I correct in reading that it's a 76 by 100? Is that correct? And it's noted 9 parking spaces available. Seems pretty large. And then the parking, employee and work vehicle parking over to the right, 65 by 110 with 10 parking spaces available. Now, I do recognize that that one seems to be more dedicated to the employee area. But, I mean, they've noted on their site plan at least 9, right? Just
Yeah,
based on
that's-
what you've shown us here, so
Yeah,
that
so you've
includes your
got-
trucks, I'm assuming, or
Right,
does that?
You've got 3 employee vehicles when they come in the morning, 3 of your 1-ton pickups, right? Or is there 4 of those? 4, okay. Plus the big tank truck, plus the 5 trailers.
So all the, pump trucks and employee parking is the parking lot to the right.
Uh-huh.
And then the pump truck and restroom trailers are parking to the right. So
Okay.
that parking lot is in a
All right.
100-foot.
So these are not 2 options, these are 2 parking lot areas.
Yeah, when you
So it's
go
not,
to the front of the house, it's 50%.
okay.
Nathan has been in our place, James has been in our place. You can ask them, it seems tight and packed in there. These other ones that's been there, a lot of that.
May I ask a question? At what point would y'all be uncomfortable having X number of porta-johns on your property before you start looking for leaks elsewhere in other property? Like, at what point would it be a headache for y'all personally and from a business standpoint?
I'm kind of done growing at this point, this is all a headache, the bigger you get.
But obviously, if we ran out of parking spaces,
Yeah.
then yeah, you're looking elsewhere.
I won't say anything to plan in the future, but I don't want to be squished to it either.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the main thing, is there really is no intention of growing much larger.
Right, plus,
It's
you know,
limitations.
We service every county that touches Madison
Hmm.
County. There's not so much more growing that we can do anyway. I mean, there's
So-
other events that will come and go, but
you're comfortable with the parking space you have available now with what you have now?
Oh, yeah.
I think what you probably need to understand is that we're not trying to limit your business. We're trying to limit we're trying to make a concession on what you can put at your house in a neighborhood with other people.
Right.
You know, I mean, if this was a designated business area, good, but you are still in a neighborhood. And that's why we're having this discussion, is not trying to tell you what you can do with your business. It's just what you can do with it in a neighborhood.
You say neighborhood, and I understand that, but it is zoned A1, right? So, I mean, what would be is the difference between that and of a farm or?
I would call
like,
anything with
for
an
me-
HOA a neighborhood. I would personally, but I could be wrong on my definition of an HOA.
then
Well,
shouldn't the HOA
one of the,
shouldn't our HOA have the rule of the number that they would want in that situation?
well, when you start talking about A1 though, the zoning has been screwed up from the very get-go. Malvern is the biggest subdivision in Madison County, and it's A1.
And Malvern limits how many people, how many vehicles and stuff you can park there.
For businesses through their HOA.
Any HOA can if they have enough votes to do it.
Yeah,
I feel like that's where the number of trails I actually come.
Okay, so basically are you comfortable with the no more than 6 that's in the condition here? not comfortable with that, even though you don't plan to have any more.
Are you comfortable
What
with
is a
no,
reasonable number?
are you comfortable with no more than
To put in
10,
there?
based on
Is
the,
10 a number, is 12 a number? I mean, these parking lots are very, very large. You could stack 100 trailers in there. The idea is to not make it look like a trailer park. It's not to be onerous to the small business, but it is in a neighborhood. A1, 85% of Madison County is like A1. There needs to be, there has to be some type of compromise. Is 12 a more reasonable number? You can always come back, you could always come back and amend if you get gangbusters and things are going great.
Honestly, if you double our trailers instead of 10, and that,
There
then
you
you
go.
can upgrade your trailers and use the other ones for like 4 HP things.
10,
Okay?
there you go.
Clay, when you said you can come back and amend,
Yeah.
what do you mean by,
Come back
like,
to
in this
the-
process,
come-
or if things
No,
are?
come back into this process and say, these conditions, it's very, very rare, just doesn't, people
Yeah,
just don't
of
do it.
course, of course. Well, I misunderstood.
But, come back in and you say, I need 12 trailers to be stored. That's an easy condition to change.
Okay.
That's, it's not the end of the world, but just go through the process, which has been pleasant so far.
And like you said a while ago, it seems like we're making up. We're trying to make your application fit our ordinance. So we're really not making up anything. We're trying to make it work for you.
You're trying to make it work. It's,
But we could read the ordinance and say it's gonna work. You wouldn't wanna hear that.
sitting in that chair a second ago, we went from one direction, everybody was raised up one way, to another direction that was up a different way. It don't feel like to us that anybody knows what we're really trying to accomplish.
And then I think too, Nathan separated the definition where some others are looking at it as a whole. So who's right? But, I don't know.
All right, can we proceed with the
Yeah.
conditions?
Yeah, but before, that's what the workshops are for. We have to work through these things. We have the ordinances that we have to look at. And we have to, and this one, we had some trouble interpreting. That's what you saw us trying to do. And you do not want any, you want to be able to buy 4 40-foot trailers later on if you decide to. And store them there. I understand that. The property, it's the site. You would let us, you would ask us to let you, and I'm not saying that you would do this, but if we don't have something about it, it's a potential possibility. And, I mean, I know nobody thinks that anybody does that around here, but 5 years ago, I had a neighbor who had a pig roast for a big birthday celebration. And they had one of these things. I mean, they had everything but private showers in these things. And it was brought in by a trailer truck. And, no matter how big your parking areas are, 4 or 5 of those would not be suitable on that site. No way. And I'm not saying that you would be doing that. But if it's not delineated here, then that's open. It can be done. So, I mean, we have to be looking at the potential also. I mean, we want to support the business, that's true.
Anybody that has, say right now, more than 6 trailers, they would have to have this actually be put in there.
no.
It's just this case.
It's the conditions, ours specifically.
We don't have anyone else applying for this.
I do have a question, just so I understand. The employee, other businesses, like landscaping companies that would be similar to us are then required for the SUP like we are, correct? That's what we've decided tonight?
That's what gives us the problems, that's what the heartburn is, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. So,
Okay.
Okay.
All
Tracy,
right, number 7, disposing of the waste from the trucks and or equipment on site shall be prohibited. Proper disposal shall be done in accordance with local, state, and federal laws and regulations. Pretty standard.
Is that, when you're saying disposing, that means you can't put it on, it doesn't say you can't transfer it
Correct.
from truck
Right.
to truck, it says you can't put it on the ground, you can't take it out of the truck and that's, or store it. It
Right.
says it just means you can't dump it on the ground. Is that what they mean by disposing?
That's what I meant when I wrote it that way, but, Brandon, is that?
That's what I think disposing means.
And the storage in the temporary tanks, I think is prohibited with the state VDH.
Yeah, that comes up on the
And
next
that's
page.
storage, that's not disposing.
Right.
So I was trying to make clarification on that
Well,
word.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he got from VEH was he could store it in the big truck on site.
Storage without disposing.
Correct.
Okay.
Number 8, any existing fencing that is on the property shall be maintained to provide buffering for the proposed use from adjoining properties. Number 9, any lighting that is provided on the property shall be directed downwards so as not to produce a glare onto adjoining properties and or roads or right-of-ways. Number 10, the illegal, unpermitted 500-gallon plastic tanks that are currently installed on the property shall be removed or properly abandoned in place in accordance with the building code and our health department regulations within 30 days from the date of approval of the special use permit. And if you don't mind, I would frankly like to get feedback from the applicant to get their perspective on if that is a reasonable time frame for them. If we could just at least ask them that.
Yes. And while we're on that, are any of the, as we went through 7, 8, 9, and so forth, were any objections to any of those?
I don't think the 30 days is enough time. 90 days seems more fair. It was 90 days in the beginning,
Mhm.
and then this was changed to 30 days. 90 would be appreciated, a little extra time. And I wrote the letter saying,
Have you contacted an excavator? I mean, that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so at this point, your intention is to excavate, remove the tanks.
Yeah.
So you would like additional time to be able to get an excavator in to do that. And these are pretty good-sized tanks, you say they're 500-gallon tanks.
2,000.
Oh, they're 2 1,000-gallon tanks, okay.
As far as the other one, the fence part bothers me.
That it shall be maintained to provide buffering?
Yeah, nobody made me put the fence up, I put the fence up on my money, my own will, just to give us buffer.
Mhm.
Fences on me, feel like the fence, another route down if I wanted to. I mean, it wasn't nothing the county made me put up, I did it, I don't want the fence to go anywhere, but I don't wanna be held reliable for maintaining this once a year, you know, I think that's a crazy rule there. I put y'all wouldn't be making me put a fence up if I hadn't done it every. Fence was.
It might be.
Yeah.
It might be. It's very common. Fence or Leland cypresses or some type of landscape vegetative buffer is very, very common in stuff we use. That's not just here, that's across the state. Very, very standard.
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think, you know, again, I just want to touch back on this, you know, and I know it's it's got to look like we're a bunch of clowns up here halfway. There's nobody in here except poor Gracie and wishing we just shut up so she can go home. And, but fencing is certainly very common to have people install that. And some other uses that could be permitted to your neighbors if there wasn't county regulation by right is pretty limited, but when you get into special uses, things like a hospital or dinner theater, storage explosives, commercial warehouse or agricultural products, small engine repair, cabinet shop, fertilizer, blending storage, farm supply. You know, I mean, commercial slaughterhouse, your neighbor could do that with a special use permit, and you guys would want that to be regulated because you want some protection. You're raising your family there.
I try to mind my own business. I don't care what my other neighbors do. I've always been that way, and I'm not one that would complain.
We,
It takes a certain person.
well, let's put it this way. If all your neighbors had the same idea, we wouldn't need the ordinances. So unfortunately, yeah. I mean,
And since that time, me and this guy have talked, and our problems are resolved. And y'all can talk to him and ask him that yourself if you want, but this, the reason we're here is, this is it.
This will provide you a legal shield, at least going forward, so you don't
yeah.
have to worry about it.
Your list limitations to your business on this site. And then, I mean, if it's more palatable, you could maintain fencing or an equivalent vegetative buffer. I don't know if that makes life easier for you, just a suggestion.
I mean, you already have the fencing in place. And, you know, how about the lighting? I think you said something about that too,
We haven't dusted the home,
which is already there. So, but you're not, any additional lighting, you don't normally have people coming in at midnight with move your trucks around or anything.
What's the next
Yes,
condition?
yes, go ahead.
Any change of use or expansion of services not included in the SUP will require an additional new or modified SUP as required by the zoning ordinance. It's pretty standard language, at least in my experience. Anybody have any issues? Moving on, if not. Zoning administrator or their designee may visit the site during hours of operation to ensure compliance with the SUP. And then the last one, the SUP may be revoked upon material noncompliance with the terms of the permit or upon violation of any other terms of the zoning ordinance, USPC, Health Department laws or regulations, or any other ordinances of Madison County. However, prior to commencement of any action to revoke this permit, the county shall notify the permit holder in writing of the material in noncompliance or violation, and the permit holder shall have 30 days thereafter to cure the material non-compliant or violation. Violation procedure shall be in accordance with Article 19 and Article 17 of the zoning ordinance.
And those last three are pretty much standard
Yes, sir.
language for, yeah.
Yeah.
Any, do you have any further comment on any of those?
I have one question.
Okay.
The zoning administrator, that should coincide during operating hours. And that's it, about
Is there, what's the standard?
What
kind
was
of
the
standard
question?
operation?
I'm
Can that be
sorry.
by appointment only? He asked.
Can it be by appointment only versus showing up whenever?
I mean, in my experience, it's typically not by appointment only because, you know, this is not directed toward them, so please don't take it personal. But if you give somebody an advance notice that you're coming, they have a tendency to make sure they're in compliance if they know in advance that you're coming. That's why we typically don't give a notice, but that's just my experience.
y'all always give them a notice of them come now. Always made an appointment a couple days out. My wife and I only got 3-year-old kid and 6-year-old daughter running around outside. I just appointment with you.
Any question or comment on any of those?
I hate the use of the singular they, the zoning administrator or their designee or its designee, it should be.
Yeah.
And you wait for someone to say, I prefer it like it is.
Yeah, I think, like Tracy says, the 11, 12, 13 are all very standard procedure. Unlike a couple of the others, which are specifically oriented toward this application. Virtually all special use applications have some version of those three statements in them.
So I know the answer. As far as the drawing administrator coming on these maps, I haven't graded in my road, and that's not here allowed to
Nobody's looking at me. I don't know, I haven't looked at that. I can get you an answer. Sure. I'll mark it down to look it up.
But for our consideration, you would prefer to have some kind of a statement about a day's notice or something like that? By appointment, yeah. Okay, any other items of contention there?
Which way are we going with that?
Okay, and well, I guess for our next workshop, we'll have to.
Okay, we're not deciding now.
Yeah, we can't, yeah, not deciding. And let's see, you also would like the 90 days for the renewal of existing tanks. Yeah. And we've been discussing that some among ourselves already on that. You, at this point, you have not started trying to find an excavator to do that for you. Okay. Any other question or discussion or question for the applicants regarding the conditions? Okay, thank you again, and thank you, Tracy. All right, any other discussion on this special use permit application? All right, now for the next 2 hours, we have the comprehensive plan final draft review. And Jonathan, I know Ms. Little could not be here, so you have, going to try to kind of run us through this?
Yes, I've got some remarks, not a presidential address. I do want to say it's important to point out those who tirelessly worked on this. As we know, this kicked off. There were community meetings, or I should say a committee, and those gave a lot of input. Even up through Mr. Webb's departure, there was a smaller group that he was working with to get this task at least towards a draft form. We know there's some grammatical errors. I spoke to Peter Work. He's been doing a lot of authoring, if you will, some of the, or critiquing. He had about 12 pages of comments, and a lot of those was grammatical things that naturally need to be cleaned up. This is a document we want to be proud of, and we want to do that. He had some comments on economic development. So the way I left it with Peter is when he gets back, I think he had a surgery planned next week in Rhode Island. any comments they have, he can bring it this way. Going through the comprehensive plan, this is a review and an update. It was last done in 2018. This kicked off, I think, late September, early October of last year. So it has been a little bit, but I believe you have at least a good starting point, a good working document in front of you. There are factual considerations to look at in here, some of it being soils and suitability of that. Farmland, which I know a lot of folks will be looking at as you go through the document. There's a lot of statistics around that. Madison has a huge agricultural base. Slopes has some reference in here. I know that's something that came up recently in one of our past zoning cases. So there's some reference to slopes in there. Population trends and demographics. So we're always looking at, are we an aging population? Do we have an increase or influx of a certain age group? Those have been updated. The data that's cited in there, most of, if you come across an area that has data that's not cited, please let me know. But when I reviewed this, whether it was agricultural data or some type of statistics, there was I don't think we have a works cited page in here that may be helpful, but I do know in the narrative, it cites where the data came from. So that's your population trends. You have economic trends and facts. Some of the things over the years and even currently in this one, you'll look at statistics such as how much percentage of the population commutes outside of the county for work versus percentage for those who work within the county. And we try to also show the labor force participation in the various employments that we have within that. Moving along, again, agricultural data is there. The housing and household trends. I know part of the earlier work discussions, and even I think Mr. Webb in past, we're introducing maybe some concepts to see how the board or the planning commission would feel about that, such as planned unit development. I think he used the term cluster homes. Maybe if that was something the planning commission and board would consider, it made sense to have it near village areas. When I say villages, think of, Criglersville, Bank, a lot of these villages that have been known for decades. So that's something to consider is the type of housing. Affordable housing is mentioned in here. I don't think that's something that you would find unique in comp plans, but what could be unique is how you view affordable housing, or what that looks like, where would you want to see it, or are we fine with what we currently have? From there, we get into community facilities and resources. So we're talking about what we have here. We start off that chapter with Parks and Recreation, and then we get into some of our other historical and cultural resources. Obviously, I believe that we still have about a sixth of our land is in Channel National Park. We highlight that, and some of the other historical sites. There may be Centurion Farms or other areas that are on a historic designation. Then you move into school and public facilities and the services that are offered there. I won't spend a lot of time on that. Broadband is referenced a little more in here, so that would be something that's newer or more defined than the last comprehensive plan. From that point, you move into plan elements. When you think of elements, those are the areas that have a defined section as well as goals and strategies listed for those plan elements. So, for example, your first plan element would be your land use, your community design and environment, and there's a goals and strategies for that. Then you move along into economic development. You have goals and strategies listed there. And it'll be interesting, personally, for me as we move along with that, because the board has taken some recent initiatives. We have a development committee, and that was more of a pre-application type committee to review rezoning and SUP applications in advance of the planning commission taking them up as cases. But the Board of Supervisors has recently formed, and we had our first meeting, I think it was last week, an economic development committee. So that's where we're going to be a little more active or proactive and things that we, may want to do to attract business or help facilitate or endeavors by existing business and so forth. But the economic development is listed with goals and strategies. Housing plan, we talked a little bit about that, so I won't spend too much about time on that. Transportation plan, the updated 6-year plan's in there. We do need to correct the fiscal year that is cited. Not a lot there unless you want to start considering, do you want any type of flyovers or specific interchanges that are outside of a smart scale? Smart scale, as you know, we have 2 of those projects that were approved. Now, these things take, anywhere beyond 5 years, probably safe to say up to 10 years to happen. So there's the R-Cut that was talked about, I think, going back to 2019 or maybe a little earlier than that is finally under construction on Route 29 there at Shelby. And then I think it was last year when the roundabout for Pratt's Fairground Road intersection was approved. But that is way beyond, we're many, many years out from construction phase of that. So outside of those 2 initiatives and our 6-year plan, really be thinking about if there are other things you would like to see in your transportation, as well as if there are transportation services that you would like to think of. We don't really have a big town. We don't have a trolley system or something of that nature. We do have other resources, depending on your need, foothills, transportation, and so forth, if you can get to one of the, I think it's 3 pickup spots in the county. But that's where you can find those types of things in the transportation plan element. The recreation plan element, again, emphasizes heavily on Hoover Ridge and some of the other pristine hiking we have. We all know that Old Rag, which exists in Madison, is the #1 trailhead in the park system. So those are your plan elements. Again, that's where a lot of your data sets or your statistical data exist. So basically, Mr. Chairman, what I would encourage, first, I apologize to this group of getting this over to you Tuesday, but this was still a work in progress even when the packet was published. I would encourage this group to take from tonight up until the next workshop and really review, start formulating some questions. What and this is just my opinion, certainly, Mr. Chairman, I would like for you to chime in. I know I threw this by you not too long ago. Maybe what would be helpful is have a working group, and my suggestion would be comprised of 2 board of supervisors, 2 planning commissioners, and the staff that's needed, to be the body that would facilitate taking the comments from the planning commission and the time in between meetings that you're going to be taking up, kind of the revisions and what was discussed. And that group can take that information, discuss it, and then staff can update this. So we're not waiting in between meetings. We can make those changes in real time. So again, no big drawn out speech. That's just really to tell you, hey, here's your draft plan. These are things overall that exist in that plan. Understanding that they still need to be vetted. And there may be data that you like or don't like, or you may want to have things added. So I think you have an adequate draft in front of you. Now it's really rolling up the sleeves and truly making it, what you feel may be appropriate for Madison.
Thank you. And I definitely agree that a working group is the way to go on this. Actually, I'd like to maybe get some of that formulated tonight, maybe get a couple of volunteers. In fact, I'd be willing to work on it. And if we've got somebody else who's got time on their hands that would help, that would be great. And thank you for the paper copy. Being of an older generation, I much prefer to be able to look at the paper copies. While we're talking about it, is anyone interested in joining the working group? We'll need everybody looking through this and chiming in, but this would be kind of like a clearinghouse to get everything put together, all the comments. Nobody else is volunteering. Or is this the Army?
Well, as chairman, you know, as my pastor said, there is voluntold, but,
Well,
Do I remember when this first started out, I remember at the first session or the second session, we said, I thought it was gonna be said that we're gonna try to make this small. We're gonna try to put something out to where you could hand this to people as they drove through and they could quickly look at this and get some kind of an oversight of Madison County. And that's the way that's what I thought I heard that first meeting.
This isn't a brochure next to Hannon's favorite pastime. I mean, good Lord.
actually,
This is 70 pages of reading here now.
I remember that.
Do you remember
myself.
that? I mean, I remember that she came up and gave a pamphlet that she'd gotten from Washington State.
Yeah.
And it was like a little pamphlet and it had like about 10 pages in. And she said, this is what I'm kind of hoping for. Thumb through it and it had some pictures and some pertinent information. And that's what I thought the direction that we were going to go on this.
Well, I've got 2 points, I think. One, this is
Yeah, the
everything
work,
that all the
yeah.
committees brought together. So there's lots of opportunities here, I think, to condense. And the second thing is the previous comp plan had appendix after appendix after appendix.
It was probably smaller than this one too, wasn't it?
No.
No, this
I've
is
got
smaller.
it.
Not by the time you took everything. But instead of having appendices, this one kind of works anything that's appropriate into the body of the plan. So that's partly why, and I agree with you, it's too long. That's one of the things we have to work on.
The last one was 97 pages.
Okay.
And some of these are intentionally left blank. You can take them out, so it would take it under 70 easily. But it is, I want to make sure I say this in a respectful tone. It is a comprehensive plan, so you've got to look at things like your land use. You've got to look at other categories like your employment, transportation. So this is not only a document, this is my opinion, but it's not only a document for us sitting here. If I want to locate to Madison County, what is your land use? If I want to bring a business, what is your employment and labor force look like? So I think it accomplishes things. Certainly, it's less. Do you want to make it less than 70? That's perfectly okay. I think some of that data, though, it would just make sense to keep in there. But that's what this commission's tasked to do, and certainly Mr. Snyder's point is relevant for you all to consider. How big you want your plan and what do you want to have included really would determine that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think, personally, I think one of the other things that's expanded it somewhat is but from the beginning, there was a deliberate intent to make this more attractive, more readable, and, hence there's a lot more graphics, there's a lot more pictures. Actually, there were fewer pictures in here than I expected them to have, but a lot of that's taking up space, too.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I just remember that from the first meeting.
And that's, in the editing phase, which is what we're in now, that's the job, and we're the editors. We've got to get this ready to present to the public and to the board of supervisors. So that's what our job's going to be for a while. And I'm pretty sure that even if I can't get another volunteer right now, we don't want all 7 of us coming twice a week to try to work on editing this. So some brave soul volunteer to come to the meetings and we'll get started on it. Mike had some good points. I agree entirely with the links. But we'll probably have to reach a compromise somewhere between that small pamphlet you were thinking about and this. Any other comment on it tonight? Jim, you like this kind of thing, don't you want to help us?
I'd love to. I'm on the Economic Development Committee. We've
Okay.
got a loading. I will come to meetings as I can.
Okay, well.
I promise to help as I can.
All right. I'll volunteer somebody else later then. Okay, any other comment tonight?
I'm just gonna make one, the condition of the roof on this courthouse in this
Yeah,
photo is
it needs to
unacceptable.
be painted.
Yeah, this we want redone after like the first week or so in July. I would agree with
All right,
that.
we need to do a deep fake on this one. Any other comment on it? I did notice, there were some good pictures in here, but I noticed one or two that were not Madison County, I thought. Anyway, I'd have to
When
look
the
back.
first ordinance was ever done, they took Fairfax County of ordinance and made the ordinance of Madison County. And part of it, when you were reading it, you
Had
didn't say
Fairfax in it.
Fairfax County.
Yep, understood. Okay, thank you, Jonathan. All right, and I know, we'll get together and make some decisions about getting that together, because we need to get that going.
Absolutely.
Right, yes.
We can talk tomorrow, sir, about your schedule, and we'll get something on the books.
Okay. Tracy, are you ready to review the amendments?
I was gonna let Jim.
Okay. Well,
So
you've
on
got,
the-
you've
on
got
the
the one,
bylaws?
yeah.
He's done all the work, so I'll let him do it.
Sure, this is, the bylaws, this is the second iteration, I think. We've gone through the first. The only thing we're gonna need to do on the first page, we'll have to put a date as to whenever we, adopt this version, these amendments. If we flip back to item 6-1, meetings. Council suggested some language that defines the two meetings that we have. And rather than referring to the first meeting as the joint meeting, we called it a regular meeting, to be followed immediately by a meeting of the board and the supervisors known as a joint meeting. So they're both regular meetings, but one is what we generally call the workshop and the other a joint meeting. So that clarification is made that there are two meetings, that's in 6-1. The next change is in page 6 of 9, 7-1-8. And this dealt with the chair controlling who was able to speak and when, recognizing that we really wanted to pay homage to the First Amendment, but at the same time wanted to have some control of the meeting so we could go home before the waning hours of the morning. And we've added at the end of what was there, the chair may limit the number of speakers and may limit speakers' times to certain durations based on the need for efficiency. Should the chair elect to impose such times, he or she should uniformly apply it to all public comment speakers. I think that's pretty straightforward and fair. And on the next page, similarly, top of 7 of 9, the chair may limit, and it's exactly the same language. And that. I had one other thing in reading it, and that is on the next page, 8 of 9. If we look back on conflicts of interest, we're defining conflicts of interest under the code. 10-1, concerning the member of the member's spouse, child, stepchild, grandchild, parent, brother, sister, grandparent, in-law, or household members. Those are generally the rules of consanguinity that are set forth. They can go well beyond that. I think this is probably an adequate degree. But 10.1, 10-1.2, concerning the work on land owned by the member, located adjacent to or within, we need to determine a distance of one's property. And I think that we should say, strike the ones and add property owned by the member as defined in 10-1-1 just above. So that includes the degrees of sanguinity that are in 10-1 for or 10.1.1 to 10.1.2. And then that is it. Except 10.1.3, which member in actions that, instead of having a financial benefit, that may have a financial gain or loss to the member. Because a financial benefit would include both positive and negative benefits, but it's better to be, I think, add the clarity of 10-1.3 which results in actions that may have a financial gain or loss to the member.
Okay, what's the logic in including a distance from the property in 10-1.2? Or could we
Not
just?
necessarily, we could have land owned or adjacent to
Yeah,
and
just-
not have a distance. But see, you know, in none of the zonings that come up before us, for example, in the one recently out on Edlin Road,
Mhm.
there were property owners that were not adjacent, but certainly were within a distance where they would be adversely affected. And while the code determines who we're to notify when in that regard, I think there should be a higher standard for the members in determining whether or not they have a conflict. Some statutes I've seen a distance. I don't know that we need it. It can be located adjacent to or within sight of or just located adjacent to, period.
Mhm. What do y'all think?
Mr. Smith, great job on all this, by the way. I'm assuming that as far as like the public notice, the mailing that has to go out prior to a public hearing to adjacent landowners and adjoining adjacent, or however they word it, I'm assuming that's a state regulation?
That is
It
correct.
seems like the state's sort of signifying those people as being the immediate interested parties or affected parties. I mean, if we wanted to do something, we could follow that.
That's a good suggestion.
Okay. How does that, adjacent to, or how is that worded?
Do you know what the language is?
No.
And is the flush language in the code is to,
Yeah, but if we've already got suitable language. While you're all looking at that, Hannon, would it be appropriate if we want to do that tonight, to just adopt this as with the amendments that have been made, with the changes tonight?
That's fine, I think particularly if everybody's in agreement to do it.
Yeah.
It's a non-issue.
Okay, get this done with. Because right now, we've only got a couple of small changes right in this area. While they're looking that up, any other comments on this? Once we get,
Tracy, you don't remember what the code section is for the notice, do you? Yeah.
I mean, I think personally that unless there's some objection, we're at the point where we can go ahead and entertain a motion to adopt this with the most recent changes and go from there.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the bylaws as amended.
Second. Okay, let's get somebody to tell us what this last wording change is, and then we'll vote on it. on some of those notices, didn't we have to go a half a mile or something like that? Because I know we had some on that, cell tower that had to go into Orange County.
Yeah, if you would send it to the county administration, if you're within a mile, and usually planning commissioners and board supervisors and the county attorney, county administrator would get those notices.
Yeah, I remembered that, but that was a special case that didn't apply to all the other neighbors then. Pending that, why don't we just say the adjacent to and put a period at the end of that and go from there and say that's what we're amending to? And then at some later time, if we decide we have to modify that, we can.
Owned by a member located adjacent to and owned by the member as defined in 10.1. Okay.
Mhm.
So 2, I think that ought to work.
It's just like everything else.
Mhm.
Trying to buy the public.
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, in that case then, we have a motion on the table, has been seconded. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all in favor of adopting our new bylaws, planning commission bylaws as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. All right, Tracy, did you have anything else? No?
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank
Should
you.
have gone to the public.
Should have gone to the public. Do you object?
Steve, I will
Yes.
do all I can to help on this, and they have.
I know,
not.
you're
We have,
overloaded.
and-